Okay, so good morning. Hope everybody's having a good day. We are on the third Perek, as you all know, Masechet Makkot. We are now on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Bet. So yesterday we started discussing. We've seen already the Mishnah. We saw the Baraita, which brought us three opinions regarding the Mishnah. Right? You remember the Mishnah listed those things. Said Ve'elu hein Elokim. These are again not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the avirot, some of the lavim for which one would get Makkot, and included in that list was chavei kritot, things for which one gets karet, but not things for which one would get mitat beitin. So we saw there were three opinions in the Tanaim as to how this works. Right? Opinion number one was Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Ishmael said that anything, including those for which one would get karet, or for which one would get mitat beitin, one would still be chayav malkot. Again, the initial understanding, chayav malkot would only occur when there was hatra'ah for malkot. So the initial understanding was whereby one receives hatra'ah for both mita and for malkot, they would still get malkot. That was Rabbi Ishmael's view. Rabbi Akiva said, no, only chavei kritot would be included for malkot, but not chavei mitat beitin. And then Rabbi Yitzchak said, no, even chavei kritot would be excluded. It would only be those things which are chav malkot by themselves. So then the Gemara went through, and we started explaining what the reasoning was, what the reasoning was for each one. Let's go back maybe to let's start on Rabbi Akiva. So we're about halfway down the Amud. We saw Rabbi Ishmael's reasoning yesterday. It's learned out from the Psukim and from the comparison to the love of Chasima, of muzzling an ox. Then Rabbi Akiva. Now Rabbi Akiva in the Baraita had said why one could still get Malkot for Chavei Kritot, but not for Mitat Beitin. He said because a person could do tshuva, and therefore if a person could do tshuva, they would be exempt from karet, and they would just get the Malkot. But if a person was already chayav mitat beitin and they'd already been beitin had already judged him, they could not do tshuva. So then it would be two punishments, which he wouldn't give. So here he explains. We're about halfway down. You give him bet. Rabbi Akiva Maitama. What is Rabbi Akiva's reasoning? We said kadei rishato mishum mishachat atam machayvo v'iatam machayvo mishtum shtei rishayot. Right? You can only execute one punishment and not two. So if Rabbi Ishmael, hanei milei mita u'mamon, or malkot u'mamon, aval mita u'malkot, mita richtai. Rabbi Ishmael agrees with that principle of risha achat and not shtei rishayot, but he says shtei rishayot means when you have two punishments which are different realms. So if one is a monetary and one is a capital punishment, one is monetary and one is physical punishment of lashes, those are two separate things. Those are two completely different punishments, and you cannot give both. However, mita and malkot are really the extension of one of the same thing, and therefore that would be okay. Rabbi Akiva obviously disagrees. So then we said, well, Rabbi Akiva iachi chavei kritot nami. Right. So if Rabbi Akiva's reasoning is that you can only get risha achat and not shtei rishayot, well, what about the case of karet? That's exactly the situation. You're going to get karet and malkot. You're going to get both. So he says the Gemara, Mayamat. So what will you answer? You answer back to say what it said in the Braita, she'im asu tshuva, right? That if he had done tshuva, then he'd be exempt from karet. Nonetheless, hashtami hat lo avdi. Nonetheless, right now he hasn't yet done it. Right? Let's just see Rashi again over there. Rashi says she'im asa tshuva. He says atam shenatan lemala. The reason that was given above, that one could exempt oneself from karet by having done tshuva, hashtamiha dai noshav. Nonetheless, right now you have not yet done tshuva. And you're giving him malkot at the time when he's still liable for karet, and that contradicts what Rabbi Akiva said. So therefore says the Gemara, the answer needs to be a little bit different. And the answer will therefore be as follows. Amar Rabbi Abau. Amar Rabbi Abau. He says that we learn it out. There's an explicit limud here from the psukim. The psukim teach us that this is a different case. Beperush ribtat Torah chayavei klitot lemalkot. Right? You see that explicitly the Torah is going to include, we'll see how explicit, but it's going to include chayavei klitot to get malkot as well. That is learned out from the psukim. Even though Rabbi Akiva said, Mishum Mashachat v'shtei rishuyot, okay, and then we're going to have to ask, what is the relationship between the first answer, which was given about doing tshuva, and this answer? But nonetheless, so this answer says as follows. Where does the Torah tell us that somebody who gets karet can get malkot as well? Says Rabbi Abba, we learn it out from a gzera shava. Gzera shava as follows. De gamar le'einei mi le'einech. Okay, so we have two psukim. One is dealing with a situation of karet, and one is dealing with a situation of malkot. You can see on the side you have the psukim. So Dalid Vayikra Kaf pasuk Yud Zayin. Right, this is in the section about the arayot. It says the ish asher yikach et achoto bat aviv or bat imo v'rat ervata v'hi teret ervato chesedu v'nichretu leinei bnei amam. Right, this is what we spoke about this yesterday. How at the beginning, the introductory section of all of the arayot, it mentions karet, that is the klal, and then later on, when it mentions one sister, it mentions karet again, and that was according to one opinion. We saw it, we learned from that. But here it says v'nichratu le'einei bnei amam, so there will be cut off, either be karet, and it uses that word le'einei, to the eyes of their nation. That is one pasuk. And then the next pasuk we have in Dvarim Kafei pasuk Gimel, it says Abaim Yakenu Lo Yosif Ben Yosif Lakoto. This is talking about Malkot. Uses the word le'einecha. So the same word which is used in the Gzera Shava, right, from the pasuk which talks about karet says le'einei, and the pasuk which talks about Malkot says le'einecha. So it is a very similar word. And therefore, we learn that there is a connection between them. By the way, whenever we have a gzera shava in the Gemara, it's not just, it's not, we could open up the Tanakh, we could do a Google search or a Barilan search, whatever it is. We could find all sorts of words that are used in one context and used in another context. It doesn't mean always wherever you see the same word, there's a connection. Gzera shava is something that we had from a tradition. There was a Masoret, there was a Kabbalah that they had. It was hinted at there in that way. But there was a tradition that there's a connection between those two words. Nonetheless, they still have to be the same word, and the Gemara is going to discuss in the upcoming lines to what extent does the word have to be the same for the Gzera Shava to be valid, so to speak. But le'einei and le'einecha is almost the same word, and that is okay. So we learn from that. So again, Amar Rabbi Abau beferush ribtat Torah chayavei kritot lemalkot. The gamar le'einei mi le'einecha. Right? The gamar means it learned out, it derived. The word gamar usually refers to a gzera shava. So matkif le Rabbi Abba bar Mema. So hang on. So now he is challenged. Rabbi Abba says so we now say as follows: the reason why Rabbi Akiva says that you could have karet and malkot together is not, as we previously said, because you could have done tshuva. At the end of the day, you have not yet done tshuva. And the principle is you should not be eligible for these two punishments at the same time. The only reason you're eligible for them is because of the Gzera Shava, which we learn out, and that connects the two. That's Rabbi Abba's explanation. So says Rabbi Abba bar Mama, if that's the case, well, we should say that we have a Gzera Shava for Chayavei Mitot Beitin as well. According to the logic where we just said, where Rabbi Akiva says you could have Karet and Malkot, you could also have Malkot and Mitot Beitin. Why? Because Nigmarei Me'einei Mi Le'einecha. Right, so we already saw the pasuk regarding Malkot, which we learned out as a Gzera Shava there. Says Le'einecha. So now we have a pasuk regarding a case of Mitat Beitin. Have a look, Bamidbar Tetvav, Pasuk Kaf Daled, and it says, Vaya'im me'einei ha'ida ne'asta lishkaga, v'asu kol ha'ida, pam b'makar echad lo'la la'ach nechoach l'Hashem minchato, etc. So we see the fact that the pasuk there uses the word me'einei. Right, have a look at Rashi. Rashi here, about halfway down the Amud. So Rashi says, le'einei. First of all, that's the previous regarding correct. He says, v'nichratu le'einei bnei amam. Remember, when Rashi had the Gemara, and his Gemara, he did not have the Psukim printed on the side. So many times Rashi is telling us, where it might be, sometimes it's obvious. And again, the assumption of the Gemara is that we know all of the Chumash Baal Peh, so it'd be easy for us to locate the Psukim when it's a unique Pasuk. Sometimes you have the words me'enei, le'enei are written many, many times in the Torah in different contexts. So Rashi is indicating to us where it is. Sometimes we find, sometimes we have a machloket amongst the Rishonim, precisely which, I think we've seen some of those cases in this Masechet, which pasuk it's referring to. But Rashi says over there, le'enei, he tells those psukim, which we've seen, and then he says here, nigmar me'enei, tichtiv be'avodat kochavim, im me'enei aidan estar lishkaga. So this me'enei is a pasuk which refers to avodah zarah, and refers to avodah zarah, where the penalty would be mitat beitin. So just like we learned Gzera Shava of le'enei to le'enecha, let's also learn the Gzera Shava of me'enei to le'enecha. So says answer. This would be the answer of Rabbi Abau back in the Gemara now. On the next line, he says danin le'enei mi le'enecha ve'ein danin me'enei mi le'einecha. Okay, meaning again, the Gzera Shava has to be a Gzera Shava. The word has to be the same, or it has to be similar. Once we start changing it, and once we start making too many changes to the word, then that's a different word. You can't derive anything from it. So le'einei and le'einecha are very similar, but to go from le'einei me'einei to le'einecha, right? It's a different prefix and a different suffix as well. That would not be. One could not learn that. So immediately says the Gemara, hang on a second. It says, "My nafkamina." Is that really the case that you can't learn it that way? V'hatan advei Rabbi Shmuel v'shava kohen uva kohen zoi shiva v'zoi bia. Okay, so there's two challenges here in terms of why we can't learn out this Gzera Shava. Number one is, and this is quite famous, that we have the case of the kohen who goes into the house with sarat. That there is a Gzera Shava which is learned there in two different psukim. The Torah says in one place it says v'shava kohen, and one place it says ubaha kohen. The kohen will come and the kohen will return. And we learn out that in fact shiva and bia are close enough. They're different words completely, but they mean the same thing. It's the same verb, more or less, referring to the same action. And therefore there is a Gzera Shava between the two. What precisely is the Gzera Shava? So we have this is in Parashat Metzorah, some complicated laws regarding if you have sarat habatim, you have a negatrat on a house. You have some green or red patches which appear on the wall of the ceilings of the house. This is not mold, but this is sarat. Although, having said that, there is actually an opinion in the Rishonim, the Ralbag is a minority opinion, and most disagree with him. He says that sarat habatim and sarat habgadim was actually some form of mold, some form of natural mold, mildew, etc. It happened for a spiritual reason. But the general consensus amongst the Mefarshim is that this was something. This is not something natural. You can't just blast it with economica. There's a message behind it, and we have specific halachot. The Kohen has to come in. The Rabbag would agree that the Kohen has to come in. That's written in the Torah. But the Kohen has to come and investigate. And the way it works is the person gets a chance. The Kohen comes and sees the house the first week, and then he comes back a week later. And if the sarat has spread, or then you have to remove things from the house. You have to take off a part of the wall, and you have to plaster it up. And you comes back a week later again. And if the sarat has spread again, or it hasn't gone away, then the whole house has to be destroyed, and the stones are taken outside the city, and they are asur b'hana'ah. So. But in one place, the Torah is talking about the situation, and it's talking about when the Kohen comes back. One place it says the Kohen will come. One place it says the Kohen will return. So have a look at Rashi. Rashi tells us like this. Right, he says Zoi Shiva v'chule lemedin ze mize gzera shava. We learn out a gzera shava. Ma shiva choletz v'kotze v'tach. Af bi'ah choletz v'kotze v'tach. So again, choletz v'kotzeh v'tach, that is the process which a person undergoes when they had tzaraat in the house, where it was when the Kohen came back and it hadn't that spread. So choletz is to remove those plasters, those stones are removed from the wall. The kotzeh, they're taken out. All the different wherever the tzaraat was, v'tach, and it's plastered over. So that is going to be the same scenario, whether it was 1 week or 2 weeks. Those different situations, whether it says v'shava kohen or whether it says uba kohen. So the point is that you could have a gzera shava that you learn out where it's a completely different word. That is number one. Again, we started off, we said in the Gemara, Matkif leRabbi Abba bar Memel iachi chavei mitot beitin nami nigmarim mi einei mi leinecha. Let's say there's a gzera shava from the word einei, me einei, and the word le'einecha. So said the Gemara, no. Danin le'einei mi leinecha. You can learn from le'einei to leinecha, but you can't learn me einei to leinecha. So then we said, ma'inaf kamina. V'ha tana devei Rabbi Yishmael v'shava kohen uba kohen zoi shiva zoi biyah. That we find a gzera shava where the word is a completely different word in the first place. So that is question number one. And question number two, v'od, furthermore, ligmor me einei mi le'einei dahagamor le'einei mi le'einecha. Right. In other words, what are we saying? Saying if you say that you can't, that it's too much of a stretch, that the word me'einei to the word le'einecha is too far to learn. Well, you could learn from the word me'einei to le'einei. So since we learn le'einei to le'einecha, we could then learn me'einei to le'einei, and then you would say in the same way that karet, you have a gzera shava to tell me that karet gets Makkot as well. So then I have a gzera shava to tell me that mitat beitin is like karet, and just like karet gets Makkot, so too mitat beitin gets Makkot. So that is the suggestion over here. Rashi, v'od nigmar me'einei the mitot beitin mi le'einei de kritot. You can learn how mitot beitin from gzera shava to the word le'einei by karet. Ma kritot lokeh, just like karet gets Makkot, dagamad le'einei mi le'einecha, because we learn from that gzera shava, af mitot beitin yokeh. So too mitot beitin. So this point answers the Gemara. Kibla minei Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, and the following. He says that Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak had this, meaning he accepted these kushiyot, and he gives a different answer. He says, "Kedei rishato mishum masha achat ata mechayvo, v'i ata mechayvo mishum shtei rishayot, berish'a hamesura lebeitin hakatuv medaber." Right. So now we're going back, and now we're rejecting the previous answer, and we're saying differently. We say when it says, right, all of this started off. We began with this limud. We began by saying kedei rishato means you have one risha and not two rishaot. So we asked them that question. Well, if that's the case, how can Rabbi Yishmael say that you could get karet and Makkot, or you could get Makkot and mitat beitin? So he said, we asked how he said you could get karet and Makkot and mitat beitin. He said that is not considered two rishayot, that's considered one rishah because it's the same thing. Okay, what about karet and Makkot, which he said according to Rabbi Akiva? So he said, no, that would seem to violate the principle, but it goes by a different, we have an explicit limit from the pasuk. So he said, once we have an explicit limit from the pasuk, well, we could take the explicit limit from the pasuk and take it further to include mitat beitin. So we say, okay, fine. It's not because of that. It's not because of the limit from the pasuk, but rather we're giving a different answer. And that is, we're refining the original principle. When we say, mishum sha'achat atam mechayvto, v'yeh atam mechayvo mishum shtei rishayot, birishah hamesura lebeitin hakatuv medaber. It's talking about which punishment? The punishment that the Beit Din can execute. Right? Rabbi Akiva was saying you can't have two punishments. The Beit Din can't execute two punishments. But if one of them is karet, which is bidei shamayim, and one of them is then there's only mishum sha'achat, which you are mechayev, because all you're doing is malkot. The karet is that's out of your hands. That is in Beit Din Shomala, and therefore that would be therefore you could have both. Let's see Rashi just a moment. Kabbalah minei Rabbi Shmuel. This is Rashi about 3 lines before the Gemara turns into the wide lines. You have Rashi over there. He says, Kibla minei Rabbi Shmuel. L'tshuva zom Rabbi Abba bar Memel, meaning he accepted this tshuva. He accepted this challenge, which Rabbi Abba bar Memel said about the Gzera Shava of Rabbi Abba. V'shani ala, and therefore he gives the following answer. Birsha'a ha-mesorah lebeit din hakatuv medaber. It's not talking about any punishment. It's not including karet. It's talking about the punishment which the Beit Din would execute. Beit Din uzaru. The Beit Din will warn shehem lo yechayvuhu shtei rishuyot, that the Beit Din themselves cannot come in and execute 2 punishments. Kagon mamon u'malkot, such as monetary and lashes, or mita u'malkot, or a death and malkot. Right? That on that point we've seen already that Rabbi Shmuel disagrees. Or mita v'mamon, or mita and monetary payment. Aval karet lo alidei Beit Dinu, and therefore karet is not in the hands of Beit Din. V'yesh leparesh kibla minei Rabbi Shmuel me Rabbi Abba terut zeh al atkafta de Rabbi Abba bar Memel. Okay, so there Rashi is just saying, what does it mean kibla minei, when we say that he accepted it or that he received it? So because what did the Gemara say? It said kibla minei Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak. Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak received or accepted. What did he receive? What did he accept from who? So one way of reading it was to say that Rabbi Abba bar Memel, right, who asked the question, he accepted it, meaning that's Rashi's first interpretation, that he accepts his kasha, and therefore he gives a different answer. Or we could say no, Rabbi Shmuel is defending Rabbi Abba from Rabbi Abba bar Memel's kasha, and therefore he says, this is what Rashi says at the end, Yesh lefaresh kibla minei Rabbi Shmuel me Rabbi Abba terutze. He had in his hands, he had this tradition that he had accepted, not that he accepts the kasha, but that he accepts that he had a tradition, he had received the following teretz, and this is the teretz which he gave back on behalf of Rabbi Abba to the kasha of Rabbi Abba bar Memel, which according to that you might say that the Gzera Shava still that he learned it still stands, but it's together with this answer as well. Okay, so Adkan.
So the word is kafta means a head or something, doesn't it? It's kafta.
Karkafta means head. Atkafta is just from the language of it's from the language of matkif, right? So yeah.
It's a challenge.
It's his challenge. That's correct. There's the challenge of Rabbi Abba bar Memel. So rather than the first interpretation that said he accepted the challenge of Rabbi Abba bar Memel and came up with his own teretz, this is saying no, he did not accept the challenge. He had a tradition of the teretz of Rabbi Abba to answer back to.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. So Adkan, everything that we've discussed. Have a look again at the first Rashi on the Amud, right at the top, when we brought the Breita, and the Breita said that according to Rabbi Shmuel, you would get Malkot even for things which are chayav karet or chayav mitzvot Beit Din. And Rashi over there said hashta sal kedata. He says right now we assume that it's talking, whenever Rashi tells us hashta sal kedata, we know that later on we're going to change our understanding. So our understanding at this point was imitrubo mital malkot kevamet, that Rabbi Shmuel was coming to say that you could get both. Person could be warned, and that's been the shaklantaria of the Gemara until now, trying to understand how could it be that a person could get both karet and malkot, or could get both malkot and mitat Beit Din. Now the Gemara is going to suggest a different way of reading the Breita and a different explanation. So we're now on the first of the wide lines in the Gemara, towards the end, about halfway through the line. Rava says a different answer. So Rava says the following. He says, this is how you should read the Breita. Rava Amar, Atru beiliktala kulei amalo pligi de'ein loke vamet. Says Rava, everybody agrees. If a person committed something which carries the death penalty, if he was warned about mitat Beit Din, right? Atru beiliktala. If they gave him atra'ah for mita. So in such a situation, everybody agrees there's no malkot, there's just mita. That would mean even if they warned him for both. Sorry. That's if they want him just for mita. Key pligi. Where do they have an argument? That if they came and warned him regarding, and they gave him hatra'ah saying he would get malkot, can you read that he would only get malkot? Right? Rabbi Ishmael Savar lav shenitan azarat mitat beitin lokin alav. Rabbi Akiva Savar lav shenitan azarat mitat beitin ein lokin alav. Okay, so what is the argument here? What are we talking about? So when we say lav shenitan azharat mitat beitin, that means you have a transgression, you have a negative prohibition, which is nitan azharat mitat beitin. It's azhara, it's warning in the Torah is for mitat. Is for mitat beitin. That is really the penalty which one should receive. However, the question is, in a scenario where a lav which carries the penalty of mitat beitin, but there was not the warning that one received. The hatra'ah before that one received was for malkut. So would they still get malkut, or do we say no? It only goes for mitat beitin. Rabbi Ishmael says yes, you would get malkut, and Rabbi Akiva says no, you would not. So it says Rashi over here. Rashi explains again. So Rashi says la'atru bei malkot. If he was warned for giving a trial for malkot, he says lechudei, only for malkot, not for mitat beitin as well. So la'azarat mitat beitin, la'azarat davar shechayavin alav mitat beitin. Right. This is a prohibition for which really one would be chayav mitat beitin. So we say ein lokin alav. That is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Says Rashi, ein lokin alav kshetru bo malkot belo mita lefi shelo nitan lavzeh la'azarat onish malkot kishalavin. Right. Again, what is the machloket come down to? That at the end of the day, we're saying the following: we know that any negative prohibition which is going to carry a penalty, we need to have an azhara in the Torah. Again, this is separate from the hatra'ah, which is in practical terms that the witnesses come and give warning. That is hatra'ah. But azhara means that it's written explicitly in the Torah. It's written there, and it's written with its punishment. So if there is something which is correct, or there's something which is mitat beitin, we need the azhara for that punishment that has to be written in the Torah. What is the default position? That for something which does not carry the penalty of mitat beitin, right? Not getting into now the exceptions of lav she'ein bo ma'aseh and lav she'nitak la'aseh, but essentially a lav which carries a standard prohibition, which carries the standard penalty, that would be malkot, right? As according to the Rambam, there are over 200 lavim for which one gets malkot. It does not say by each and every one of those that you would get malkot. We don't have a specific azhara for malkot, but that is something which is there, which is included, which is implicit in every single lav. So the question is, when you have a separate azhara, okay, when you have an azhara in the Torah for mitat beitin, does that now uproot the azhara that we would say that you have for malkot, or not? Right? Rabbi Ishmael over here is saying that even though you have a lav which is nitan azarat mitat beitin, nonetheless it's included in the category of all the lavim for which one would get malkot anyway. According to Rabbi Akiva, no, you have a specific azarah for mitat beitin and not for malkot, and therefore you cannot have that. So that's what Rashi is explaining. He says, "Ein loken alav." I'm reading it again. He says, "Kshetrubo malkot below mita." When he was given hatra'ah, when the witnesses came and warned him about malkot and not about mita, what happens? Says Rabbi Akiva, he doesn't get malkot. Lefi shelo nitan navzel azarat onish malkot. So there was no azarah. There was no azara for malkot. Kishar lavin, like you have in the case of other mitzvot lo taseh. Sherei hutzrach lazhiro. In order for a person to get that penalty, they need to be warned. Shem lo ken lo yachol lachayvo mita. If there was no azara, then you could not give him a chayv mita either. So since there is an azara for mita beitin, now the witnesses made a mistake. They said we're giving you hatra'ah for malkot. Doesn't matter, says Rabbi Akiva, there will not be malkut in such a case. So that's what Rava is explaining in the Gemara. Again, from the first of the wide lines. We said, Rav Amar, Itru Beilektala, if they warned him about the fact that he was going to get mita, so everybody agrees that he would get mita and he would not get malkot. The machloket was, and again, the implication here is that the first case that Rava mentions is even if the witnesses said gave him atra'ah for mita and for malkot, contrary to what we said before. Here, if they gave him atra'ah for mita and malkot, no, that's mita and that's it. There's no malkot, according to everyone. Second case is where they exclusively give him atra'ah for malkot and not for mita. Right, that's kipliki that Rabbi Malkot. Rabbi Ishmael Savar, lav shenitan nazrat mitat beitin, lokin alav. Rabbi Ishmael says, even though the azhara in the Torah is for mitat beitin, nonetheless you would still get malkot. Rabbi Akiva Savar, lav shenitan nazrat mitat beitin, ein lokin alav. Akiva says, no, you would not get malkot because the azhara in the Torah is only about mitat beitin. So now the Gemara asks the obvious question. We are 4 lines down from the wide lines in the Gemara, 6 lines from the bottom of the Amud. Continues with Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva ihachi. If that's the case, well then chayvei kritot nami lav shenitan nazarat kareitu. In the same way that you say that a lav shenitan nazarat beitin, since the azara is only about mitat beitin, and therefore that is uprooted, so to speak, the azara regarding malkot, and you could not give malkot according to Rabbi Akiva. Same thing if I have a lav which is an isur karet, that it's that the azara in the Torah is regarding karet and is not regarding mitat, is not regarding malkot. So how could you then give malkot in such a case? Right? Rabbi Akiva yachi chayvei kritot nami lav shenitan azarat karetu. Answers the Gemara. Amar leRav Mordechai leRav Ashi hachi amar avimi mehagronia mishmei derava. Right. So this is learned out from Rav Mordechai. Rav Mordechai said to Rav Ashi, "This is what Avimi from Hagronia, that's a place, said in the name of Rava." Okay, and Rava, remember, is the one who gave this whole explanation of the Braita. So he said, "Chayavei kritot lo tzrichi hatra'ah." He says, no, when it comes to karet, that's going to be different. Why? Because in order for somebody to be chayv karet, they don't need hatra'ah. In fact, they don't need a warning. How does he know that? He's learned that Sharei Pesach umila anash af al pi shelo hizhir. Okay, so as we said yesterday, we explained yesterday that Pesach and Milah are 2 exceptions. These are the only positive mitzvot, the only mitzvot aseh, which carry the penalty of karet. The first Mishnah in Kritot lists 36 different transgressions, which one gets karet, and the only positive ones are these. So you understand that for failing to perform a positive mitzvah, right? There's not going to be any hatra'ah. What is hatra'ah? What is warning? Warning means a person's about to do something, and you warn them, don't do this, or the punishment will be X, right? How can you say, a person is not eating the Korban Pesach. If you continue not to eat the Korban Pesach within Toch Kedei Dibur, you won't get it. Doesn't work. There's no hatra'ah for a positive mitzvah. So just like you see, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to build a binyanav that just like these are chayvei kritot, which there is no hatra'ah. So we could say that there is never going to be hatra'ah for chayvei kritot, and therefore essentially the azara would then be irrelevant. He says, chayvei kritot lo tzrichei hatra'ah. This is the opinion of Rava. Sheharei Pesach u'milah anash af al pi shelo hizhir. So you could get the punishment even though you did not have the azhara either. Says Rashi, Rab Pesach u'milah en bain lo taseh v'anash lem karet. There is no negative transgression over there. Therefore, there is no the fact that there is no. Why is Rashi telling us that they are lo taseh? Because the fact they are not lo taseh means there's no azhara either. So says the Gemara, wait a minute. Maybe we say that you need the azara for the only where there's a korban, and yeah, because these are positive mitzvot, therefore there would be no korban. So it says the Gemara, v'dilma azhara lekorban, right? Maybe you need the azhara for the korban. The pesach umila, the leipu azhara lo. Sorry, I just lost the place there for a moment. Right, the pesach umila, the leipu azhara lo maiti korban. So pesach and milah as well. There's no azara, so one does not bring the korban for not having brought them. What's the idea of korban? We're saying essentially is when one does it b'shogeg, right? All of these transgressions where it was b'mezid, so then that would be chayav karet or in this case as well. But if it was b'shogeg, one would have to bring the korban. Says Rashi over here, the Rashi on the long lines. It says the korban. She'im yaseh shogeg yavi korban. Right, if one did it b'shogeg, then they'd have to bring the korban. They wouldn't get karet, but they'd have to bring the korban. Pesach umilah and korban b'shogeg shalayim. K'damrin b'kritot b'perek kama. Right, he says for Pesach and milah, there is no korban if one neglected to fulfill the b'shogeg, as we learn in the first Perek of Kritot. HaPesach v'milah mitzvat aseh, that they are positive mitzvot. Klomar, eino bichlal shal kritot. They are not included with all the other chiyuvei karet. Limnotanim shal kritot shnemnu sham kulam lomar. That all the other cases there are listed together to say she'im masaum kulam be'elam echad chayav korbanot k'mispar kritot. Okay, so there's a discussion. If one did all these different transgressions, which one is chayav karet, in the same go, and didn't realize they were different actions, how many different korbanot would one have to bring? But the point is, we see from here as well. We started off with our question. The question was that since Rabbi Akiva says that when it's that a lav shenitan lazarat mintat beitin, one would not get Makkot for. So why don't you say the same thing for something which is karet? So he said, okay, well, when it comes to karet, you don't need an azhara, and maybe you don't need the warning, and you learn that out from Pesach and Milah, which are the two mitzvot aseh for which one would get karet for neglecting to fulfill them. So then we said, no, maybe we know that Pesach and Milah are different. We know that those are examples whereby there is no korban if one didn't do it b'shogeg. So maybe we could say that yes, still for where you're chayav karet, there would still need to be an azara wherever there is a korban, and that is wherever it's a lot aseh. So that's where we are right now. So we say. Now 3 lines from the bottom. So we say no. Hatam lava inutama ela mishum deitkish kol Torah kula lavodat kochavim. The reason is we're going to see the entire Torah is compared to avodat kochavim. Ma avodat kochavim shev al taseh. Afkol shev al taseh la puke hane dekum ve'aseh. Just as avodat kochavim, that one would transgress even where it's a shev al taseh, where it's a negative negative mitzvah of what not to do. The cases of Pesach and Milah are going to be different. To exclude these cases which are kum v'aseh, whereby there is something which one has to go out and do actively, meaning the korban Pesach and Milah. And over there, the karet is going to be a different example. That is going to be karet is only going to be in a case whereby one whereby one neglected to actively go and fulfill it, and that is why in those cases there is no azhara. Okay, Beseda, we'll delve into that a little bit deeper tomorrow, but I think we'll stop there for today, and we'll continue with that. And then we have the explanation of Ravina, who gives a different explanation to the Braita. So tomorrow we'll continue. We'll finish off the explanation of Rava and move on to the next.
Rabbbi Kenigsberg, what we've learned here that you've got avazah or whatever it was. What happens if they haven't had the right kind of, if the two, shall we say, the two witnesses haven't given the right kind of warning.
Well, that's exactly what we're discussing. Meaning, if you're saying if they give the wrong punishment, meaning if they say if it's a transgression for which one should be mitat beit din, and they give the warning for malchus,
yeah,
that's exactly the machloket.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Are we meeting